The Oath of the Brothers by Clifton Andrew Mather. Copyright 2020. Chapter 1. The Battle at Dawn. The morning sky burned red long before the sun rose, a deep, unsettling crimson that bled across the clouds like a warning. Soldiers whispered that such a sky meant the heavens were watching, weighing the hearts of men before blood was spilled. Rowan didn't know about heavens or omens, but he knew a battlefield when he smelled one: cold iron, damp earth, and the sharp tang of fear that clung to the back of the throat. He tightened the straps of his leather gauntlet, pulling them snug until they bit into his wrist. The familiar pressure steadied him, his breath misted in the chill air, drifting upward like smoke from a dying fire. Around him the soldiers of Highcrest formed their shield wall, rows of steel and determination stretching across the frostbitten field. Their armor wasn't ornate, but it was well kept, polished by hands that believed in the kingdom they served. Highcrest, the kingdom of righteousness, a land that demanded discipline, honor, and sacrifice. Rowan had given it all three, and he would give more before the day was done. Beside him stood a knight he barely knew, Sir Aldrich, quiet, steady, watchful. His armor was plain, almost too plain for a knight of Highcrest. No family crest, no decorative etching, just solid, functional steel. But Rowan had noticed the way he moved, disciplined, precise, like a man trained by someone important, someone who expected perfection. Aldrich adjusted the strap of his shield, then glanced at Rowan. His eyes were calm but not cold, the eyes of a man who had seen battle before and understood its cost. "You ready?" Aldrich asked, voice low. Rowan rolled his shoulders, feeling the weight of his sword at his hip. "Ready enough." A faint smile tugged at Aldrich's mouth, the kind that didn't quite reach the eyes. "That's all any of us can be." A horn sounded across the valley, long, low, and mournful. The Iron Host was on the move. They appeared over the ridge like a dark tide, their mismatched armor clanking, their banners tattered and stained. Mercenaries, deserters, criminals, a force held together not by loyalty but by coin and cruelty. Their weapons were brutal things: hooked axes, spiked maces, jagged blades meant to maim more than kill. Some wore pieces of armor taken from fallen foes, still bearing the colors of kingdoms long conquered. Rowan swallowed hard. Here they come. The first wave charged, boots pounding the frozen ground. Rowan braced his shield, feet planted wide. The impact hit like a battering ram. His shield shuddered, his arm jolting with pain. He pushed back, teeth gritted, and swung his sword in a tight arc, catching an enemy across the shoulder. Blood sprayed, steaming in the cold air. Beside him, Aldrich fought with calm efficiency. His sword moved in clean, controlled motions, no wasted energy, no wild swings. He stepped where he needed to step, struck where he needed to strike. Rowan found himself matching Aldrich's rhythm without meaning to, their movements aligning like gears in a well-built machine. For a moment, Rowan thought they might hold. Then the second wave hit. The Iron Host crashed into them with renewed fury. Rowan's shield splintered under a hammer blow, wood cracking near his elbow. He staggered, barely keeping his footing. Aldrich was knocked to one knee, his shield ripped from his grasp. Rowan didn't think. He stepped in front of Aldrich, raising his broken shield just in time to catch a spear meant for Aldrich's throat. The spearhead punched through the wood, stopping inches from Rowan's face. Pain shot through his arm, but he held firm. "Up!" Rowan shouted, voice raw. Aldrich rose, eyes blazing with gratitude he didn't have time to speak. He grabbed Rowan's arm, steadying him, and together they pushed forward, blades flashing. Rowan saw Aldrich take a cut across the shoulder but keep fighting, jaw clenched. Rowan himself felt blood trickling down his forearm where a blade had grazed him. But the line was breaking. Highcrest soldiers were falling back, some dragged down by grappling hooks, others overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Rowan swung until his arms trembled, until his shield was nothing but splinters hanging from a strap, until a blow to the back of his helmet sent stars exploding across his vision. He hit the ground hard. The world spun. Boots thundered around him. Someone kicked his sword away. Rough hands grabbed his arms, yanking them behind his back. Cold iron shackles clamped around his wrists. Through the haze, he heard Aldrich's voice, strained, angry, but alive. "Rowan, hold on!" Rowan tried to lift his head, but another blow sent him sprawling. His cheek pressed into the frozen dirt. He tasted blood and earth. The cold seeped into his bones, numbing him, making it hard to think. The last thing he saw before darkness swallowed him was Aldrich being dragged away in chains, fighting until they clubbed him to the ground. Then everything went black. Chapter 2. Captured by the Iron Host. Rowan woke to the sound of metal dragging across stone. For a moment he didn't know where he was. His vision swam, shapes blurring into darkness and flickering torchlight. His head throbbed with a deep, pulsing ache, and when he tried to lift it, pain shot down his neck like a blade. Cold iron bit into his wrists. Chains. Memory returned in fragments. The battle, the shield wall breaking, Aldrich's shout, the blow to his helmet. He forced his eyes open fully. He was in a long, low stone chamber, the ceiling so close he could have touched it if his hands weren't shackled behind him. The air smelled of sweat, rust, and damp straw. Torches guttered in iron brackets along the walls, casting long shadows that danced like spectres. Other prisoners lined the chamber, soldiers of high crest, some wounded, some unconscious, all chained. Rowan's stomach twisted at the sight of them. Men he had fought beside, men who had trusted him. A bootstep echoed. Rowan tensed. A guard approached, a hulking brute with a shaved head and a scar running from his brow to his jaw. He carried a short iron rod, tapping it against his palm as he walked. His armor was pieced together from mismatched plates, some bearing the colors of kingdoms Rowan recognized. Trophies. The man stopped in front of Rowan and crouched, studying him with a predator's curiosity. "Awake, are you?" the guard growled. "Good. The captain likes them awake." Rowan clenched his jaw but said nothing. The guard smirked. "You High Crest Knights always think silence makes you strong. It doesn't. It just makes the breaking take longer." He stood and moved on, tapping the rod against the bars of another cell. Rowan exhaled slowly, forcing himself to stay calm. Panic would only waste strength he didn't have. A voice came from the shadows to his right. "Rowan." Rowan turned his head sharply. Aldrich sat chained a few feet away, his back against the wall, his face bruised but alert. His wrists were bound like Rowan's, but he held himself with a quiet steadiness that Rowan found strangely reassuring. "You're alive," Rowan breathed. Aldrich nodded. "Barely. You took a hard hit. So did you." Aldrich gave a faint, humorless smile. "I've had worse." Rowan studied him. Aldrich's armor was dented, his shoulder bleeding through a torn strap. Dirt streaked his face, but his eyes were clear, sharp, focused, unbroken. "How long have we been here?" Rowan asked. "Hard to say. A few hours, maybe more. They dragged us through the woods before bringing us underground." Rowan shifted, testing the chains. They were tight, unforgiving. His shoulders ached from being forced back at an unnatural angle. Aldrich watched him. "Don't waste your strength. They'll move us soon." "Move us where?" "To the labor pits, most likely," Aldrich said quietly. "The Iron Host doesn't keep prisoners for ransom. They keep them for work." Rowan's stomach tightened. He had heard rumors. Men forced to dig trenches, haul stone, build fortifications until they collapsed. Those who slowed down were beaten. Those who resisted were killed. Before he could speak, the chamber door slammed open. A group of guards entered, dragging chains and barking orders. Rowan's pulse quickened. One guard pointed at him and Aldrich. "Those two, bring them." Rough hands seized Rowan, hauling him to his feet. His legs nearly buckled, but he forced himself upright. Aldrich was pulled up beside him, wincing as his injured shoulder was jerked. They were marched out of the chamber and into a narrow corridor carved from rough stone. The air grew colder as they walked, and Rowan's breath fogged in front of him. Torches flickered along the walls, casting jagged shadows. They emerged into a vast underground cavern. Rowan's breath caught. Hundreds of prisoners labored under the watch of armed guards. Some hauled carts filled with rock. Others swung pickaxes at the cavern walls. The sound was deafening, metal striking stone, men grunting with effort, guards shouting commands. A guard shoved Rowan forward. "You two! Over there!" They were led to a section where prisoners were digging a trench. Rowan's chains were loosened just enough to allow movement, but not enough to fight. A pickaxe was thrust into his hands. "Work!" the guard snarled. "Or bleed!" Rowan gripped the handle, feeling splinters bite into his palms. He glanced at Aldrich, who had been given a shovel. Aldrich met his eyes and gave a small nod, a silent message. "Stay alive." Rowan swung the pickaxe. Pain shot through his shoulders, but he forced himself to keep going. The stone was hard, unyielding. Sweat dripped down his face despite the cold. Hours passed, or what felt like hours. Time blurred into a haze of exhaustion and pain. Rowan's muscles burned, his hands blistered, his breath came in ragged gasps. Aldrich worked beside him, slower than usual because of his injured shoulder, but steady. When Rowan faltered, Aldrich murmured, "Keep going." When Aldrich stumbled, Rowan whispered, "Lean on me." They were strangers no longer. They were surviving together. As the guards called for a shift change, Rowan's vision swam. He dropped to one knee, chest heaving. A guard approached, raising his rod. Aldrich stepped between them. "He's done enough," Aldrich said, voice low but firm. The guard sneered. "You giving orders now?" "No," Aldrich said. "Just truth." The guard raised the rod higher. Rowan braced for the blow, but another guard called out, "Leave them! Captain wants them alive." The rod lowered. Rowan exhaled shakily. Aldrich helped him to his feet, supporting him with his good arm. Rowan leaned into him, too exhausted to protest. As they were marched back toward the prison chambers, Rowan glanced at Aldrich. "You didn't have to do that." Aldrich looked ahead, jaw set. "Yes, I did." Rowan didn't know it yet, but this was the first moment, the first spark of the brotherhood that would define both their lives. And the Iron Host had no idea what kind of bond they were forging in the dark. Chapter 3. The Labour Pits. Rowan woke before the guards came for them. His body ached from the previous day's labour, shoulders burning, wrists raw from the chains, legs trembling with every shift of weight. The stone floor beneath him was cold enough to numb his spine. He blinked against the dim torchlight, trying to gather his thoughts before the day began. Aldrich was already awake. He sat with his back against the wall, eyes half closed, breathing slow and steady. Rowan didn't know how he managed to look composed in a place like this, but somehow he did. Even bruised, even exhausted, Aldrich carried himself like a man who refused to break. "You sleep at all?" Rowan muttered. Aldrich opened one eye. "A little." Rowan snorted. "Liar." A faint smile tugged at Aldrich's mouth. "Maybe." Before Rowan could reply, the iron door screeched open. Guards stormed in, barking orders, dragging prisoners to their feet. Rowan braced himself as rough hands hauled him upright. His muscles screamed in protest. Aldrich rose beside him, slower this time. Rowan noticed the way he favoured his injured shoulder, subtle, but there. They were marched through the narrow corridor again, the cold air biting at their skin. When they stepped into the cavern, the noise hit them like a wave, metal striking stone, men grunting, guards shouting. Rowan's stomach tightened. Another day. A guard shoved a pickaxe into Rowan's hands. "Dig!" Rowan gripped the handle. His palms were blistered from yesterday, and the wood bit into the raw skin. He forced himself to lift the tool. Aldrich was given a shovel again. He nodded once to Rowan. The same silent message as before. Stay alive. They worked. Hours blurred into a rhythm of pain and breath. Rowan swung the pickaxe, each strike sending a jolt through his arms. Sweat dripped down his face despite the cold. His vision wavered more than once, but he kept going. Aldrich worked beside him, slower today. His shoulder was worse. Rowan could see it in the tightness of his jaw, the way he paused between movements. But Aldrich didn't complain. He didn't ask for help. He just kept going. At one point, Rowan stumbled. His knees buckled, and he caught himself on the pickaxe handle. Aldrich stepped closer, steadying him with his good arm. "Breathe," Aldrich murmured. Rowan nodded, forcing air into his lungs. "You too." Aldrich huffed a quiet laugh. Fair enough. They kept working. Moderate hardship meant pain, exhaustion, and fear, but not despair, and Rowan felt that difference now. Every time he faltered, Aldrich was there. Every time Aldrich slowed, Rowan stepped closer. They were becoming something more than fellow prisoners. They were becoming necessary to each other. When the guards finally called for a shift change, Rowan's arms felt like lead. He dropped to one knee, chest heaving. A guard approached, raising his iron rod. Rowan braced himself, but Aldrich stepped forward again, placing himself between Rowan and the blow. "He's done enough," Aldrich said, voice steady despite the tremor in his arm. The guard sneered. "You again?" Aldrich didn't move. Rowan stared at him, stunned. Aldrich wasn't reckless. He was deliberate. He had chosen to stand there. Before the guard could strike, another called out, "Leave them. Captain wants them alive." The rod lowered. Aldrich exhaled slowly. Rowan felt something shift inside him, something quiet, something deep. As they were marched back toward the prison chamber, Rowan leaned slightly toward Aldrich, letting him take some of his weight. "You didn't have to do that," Rowan said quietly. Aldrich kept his eyes forward. "Yes, I did." Rowan didn't answer. He didn't need to. Something had begun between them. Something forged in sweat, pain, and shared breath. Something that neither of them fully understood yet. But it was growing. And the Iron Host had no idea what kind of bond they were helping to create. Chapter 4. The First Escape Attempt. Rowan felt the shift in the cavern long before the guards announced the next work rotation. It was in the way the prisoners moved, slower, quieter, glancing at each other with something that wasn't quite fear. It was in the way the guards barked orders more sharply, as if sensing something they couldn't name. And it was in the way Aldrich kept scanning the cavern walls, counting guards, watching patterns. Rowan knew that look. Aldrich was planning something. When the guards shoved them toward the trench line again, Rowan leaned close enough to whisper, "What are you thinking?" Aldrich didn't look at him. Not here. They worked for hours, the ache in their bodies becoming a familiar companion. Rowan's palms were raw, his shoulders burning. Aldrich's injured shoulder slowed him, but he hid it well enough to avoid drawing attention. When the guards called for a water break, Rowan and Aldrich were herded with a group of prisoners toward a trough carved into the stone. The water was cold and metallic, but Rowan drank anyway. Aldrich didn't. He was watching the guards. Rowan followed his gaze. Two guards were arguing near the supply crates. One slammed his fist on a crate lid, the other shoved him. Their voices rose. A distraction. Aldrich's voice was barely a breath. "Rowan, listen carefully." Rowan straightened. "There's a tunnel behind the far wall," Aldrich murmured. "I saw guards bringing supplies through it yesterday. It leads upward." Rowan's pulse quickened. "How do you know?" Aldrich's eyes flicked toward the crates. "Because they brought me through it when they dragged us in." Rowan stared at him. "And you're telling me this now?" Aldrich's jaw tightened. "Because now we have a chance." The arguing guards shoved each other again. One stormed off, the other kicked a crate, cursing. Aldrich nodded toward the far wall. "When they move us back to the trench, we break off. Stay low, stay close." Rowan swallowed hard. "What about the others?" Aldrich's expression darkened. "We can't save everyone. Not today." Rowan hated it, but he knew Aldrich was right. The guards began herding prisoners back to work. Rowan and Aldrich moved with the group, heads down, chains clinking softly. Rowan's heart pounded so hard he thought the guards might hear it. When they reached the trench line, Aldrich whispered, "Now!" They slipped sideways, ducking behind a stack of stone blocks. Rowan held his breath as a guard passed only a few feet away. Aldrich grabbed Rowan's arm and pulled him into the shadows. The tunnel entrance was barely visible, a narrow gap behind a collapsed section of wall. Rowan squeezed through first, scraping his shoulder on the stone. Aldrich followed, wincing as his injured arm brushed the rock. The tunnel was dark, cold, and steep. Rowan's breath echoed off the walls. Chains rattled softly with every step. Behind them, a shout rang out. Aldrich froze. Rowan's stomach dropped. "They've noticed," Aldrich whispered. "Then we move," Rowan said. They climbed faster, stumbling over loose stones. The tunnel twisted sharply, then opened into a wider passage. Rowan could feel fresh air, faint but real. "We're close," he said. Aldrich nodded, but his breathing was strained. Rowan glanced back and saw the sweat on his brow, the tightness in his jaw. His shoulder was worse than he'd admitted. Rowan slowed. "Lean on me." Aldrich hesitated, pride flickering, then nodded once. Rowan slipped under his arm, taking some of his weight. Behind them the shouts grew louder. They reached a wooden door reinforced with iron bands. Rowan pushed it. It didn't budge. He pushed harder. Nothing. Aldrich stepped forward, bracing his good shoulder against the wood. "Help me." Rowan pressed beside him. Together they shoved, muscles trembling, breath ragged. The door groaned. A sliver of light appeared. Rowan's heart leapt. Then a voice roared behind them. "Stop!" Rowan spun. 3 guards charged up the tunnel, weapons drawn. Aldrich grabbed Rowan's arm. "Go!" Rowan shook his head. "Not without you." Aldrich's eyes flashed. Frustration, fear, loyalty, all tangled together. "Rowan!" The guards were almost on them. Rowan grabbed the pickaxe still chained to his wrist and swung it in a wide arc. The nearest guard stumbled back, surprised. Aldrich stepped forward, using his chain like a whip, striking another guard across the face. For a moment, just a moment, they held the tunnel. But the 3rd guard slammed into Rowan, knocking him to the ground. Rowan's head hit stone, stars burst across his vision. He heard Aldrich shout his name, heard the clash of metal, heard boots pounding. Then hands seized him, dragging him backward. Aldrich fought like a cornered wolf, but he was outnumbered. A guard struck him across the back. He fell to one knee. Another guard kicked his injured shoulder. Aldrich gasped, collapsing. Rowan reached for him, fingers brushing stone. "Aldrich!" A guard slammed Rowan's head against the floor. Darkness swallowed him. Rowan woke hours later, chained in a different chamber, smaller, colder, with no other prisoners. Aldrich lay beside him, unconscious, his shoulder wrapped in a crude bandage. Rowan's throat tightened. They had failed. But the attempt had changed something. Rowan felt it in his bones. They had fought together, bled together, risked everything together. And they would try again. Because neither of them was giving up. Not now. Not ever. Chapter 5. The Bond Forged in Pain. Rowan drifted in and out of consciousness. He wasn't sure how long he'd been lying on the cold stone floor. Minutes, hours, maybe longer. His head throbbed with a dull, pulsing ache. His wrists burned where the shackles had rubbed his skin raw. Every breath felt heavy, as if the air itself resisted entering his lungs. But none of that mattered when he turned his head and saw Aldrich. The knight lay slumped against the wall, his face pale beneath the bruises. His shoulder was wrapped in a rough bandage, stained dark where the wound had bled through. His breathing was shallow but steady. Rowan pushed himself upright, wincing as pain shot through his ribs. He crawled the short distance between them, chains dragging across the floor. "Aldrich," he whispered. "Hey! Wake up!" Aldrich didn't move. Rowan swallowed hard. He reached out, placing a hand on Aldrich's good shoulder. "Come on, don't do this." Aldrich stirred, a faint groan escaping his lips. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then sharpening as they found Rowan. "You're alive," Aldrich murmured. Rowan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Barely." "You?" Aldrich gave a weak, humorless smile. "I've had better days." Rowan huffed a quiet laugh despite the ache in his chest. "You and me both." Aldrich shifted, grimacing as pain shot through his injured shoulder. Rowan steadied him without thinking, slipping an arm behind his back to help him sit upright. Aldrich leaned against the wall, breathing slowly. "You shouldn't have stayed in the tunnel. You could have gotten out." Rowan shook his head. "Not without you." Aldrich's eyes softened, not with pity, but with something deeper, respect, gratitude, something Rowan wasn't sure he deserved. "You're stubborn," Aldrich said quietly. "So are you." Aldrich's smile widened just a little. "Fair." Silence settled between them, not heavy, but steady. The kind of silence shared by men who had survived something together. Rowan studied Aldrich's shoulder. The bandage was crude, barely holding. "They hit you hard," Aldrich shrugged with his good arm. "I've had worse." Rowan frowned. "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." Rowan hesitated, then said, Let me see. Aldrich raised an eyebrow. You're not a healer. No, Rowan said. But I'm here. Aldrich held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Rowan carefully loosened the bandage. Aldrich hissed through his teeth but didn't pull away. The wound wasn't deep enough to be fatal, but it was ugly, swollen, bruised, and bleeding more than it should. Rowan tore a strip from the bottom of his own tunic and pressed it gently against the wound. Aldrich tensed, jaw clenched, but stayed still. You didn't have to protect me, Rowan said quietly. Aldrich's voice was low. Yes, I did. Why? Aldrich looked at him, really looked at him, as if weighing the truth of his own answer. Because you would have done the same, he said. Rowan didn't argue. He couldn't, because Aldrich was right. They sat in silence again, Rowan's hand steady against Aldrich's shoulder, Aldrich's breath slow and controlled. The torchlight flickered across the stone walls, casting long shadows that swayed like ghosts. After a while, Aldrich spoke. Rowan, yeah? If we get another chance, we take it. Rowan nodded. Together. Aldrich's eyes softened. Together. Rowan tightened the makeshift bandage and leaned back against the wall beside him. Their shoulders brushed, not by accident, but because neither of them had the strength to sit apart anymore. Pain had forged something between them, something quiet, something strong, something that would not break, not here, not now, not ever. Chapter 6. The Successful Escape. Rowan didn't know what woke him, the scrape of boots, the clatter of chains, or the low groan from Aldrich's side. His eyes snapped open, instinct sharpened by days of captivity. The chamber was dim, lit only by a single torch sputtering in its bracket. A guard stood at the door. Not one of the usual brutes. This one was smaller, wiry, with a nervous twitch in his jaw. He glanced down the corridor, then slipped inside, closing the door behind him. Rowan tensed, shifting his weight to protect Aldrich. The guard raised both hands. Quiet. I'm not here to hurt you. Rowan didn't relax. Then why are you here? The guard swallowed hard. Because I'm leaving. Tonight. And I'm not dying alone. Aldrich stirred beside Rowan, lifting his head. You're deserting. The guard nodded. The Iron Host is falling apart. Supplies are low. Men are starving. The captain's losing control. I'm getting out before this place collapses. Rowan narrowed his eyes. And you want us to come with you? I want a distraction, the guard said bluntly. You two cause chaos. I slip out in the confusion. Everyone wins. Aldrich pushed himself upright, wincing as his shoulder protested. And why should we trust you? You shouldn't, the guard said. But you don't have another chance. Rowan and Aldrich exchanged a look, a silent conversation built on everything they'd endured. Aldrich nodded once. We'll take it. The guard stepped forward, pulling a ring of keys from his belt. His hands shook as he unlocked their shackles. The chains fell away with a heavy clatter. Rowan rubbed his wrists, feeling blood return to his hands. Aldrich stood slowly, leaning on the wall for balance. Rowan moved to steady him, but Aldrich shook his head. I'm fine. Rowan gave him a look. Aldrich sighed. Mostly fine. The guard cracked the door open. You have maybe 2 minutes before the next patrol. After that, you're on your own. Rowan stepped forward. Where's the exit? Follow the main corridor, the guard whispered. Turn left at the fork. There's a supply tunnel that leads to the surface. Aldrich's eyes narrowed. Why help us at all? The guard hesitated. Because I'm tired of watching good men die. He slipped out, leaving the door ajar. Rowan exhaled. This is it. Aldrich nodded. Stay close. They moved into the corridor, keeping low. Rowan's heart pounded in his chest. Every shadow felt like a threat. Every sound made him flinch. They reached the fork. A shout echoed behind them. Rowan spun. A guard had spotted the open cell door. Run, Aldrich said. They sprinted down the left passage, boots pounding the stone. Rowan grabbed Aldrich's arm when he stumbled, pulling him forward. The tunnel sloped upward, the air growing colder, fresher. Behind them, guards shouted orders. Don't stop, Rowan said. I wasn't planning to, Aldrich muttered. They reached a wooden door reinforced with iron bands, the same one from their failed escape. Rowan's stomach twisted. Aldrich stepped forward. Together, Rowan braced beside him. They shoved with everything they had left. The door groaned. Boots thundered behind them. Rowan gritted his teeth. Push! Aldrich growled through the pain. I am! The door cracked open, just enough. Rowan squeezed through first, then pulled Aldrich after him. They stumbled into a narrow passage lit by moonlight filtering through cracks in the stone. Freedom. Almost. A guard lunged through the doorway, grabbing Rowan's ankle. Rowan kicked hard, connecting with the man's jaw. The guard fell back, and Rowan slammed the door shut. Aldrich grabbed a fallen beam and jammed it through the door handles. The guards pounded from the other side. Rowan leaned against the wall, chest heaving. We did it! Aldrich nodded, breath ragged. Not yet. Keep moving. They followed the moonlit passage until it opened into the night air. Rowan froze, overwhelmed by the sight. Stars scattered across the sky, cold wind brushing his face, the scent of pine and earth replacing the stench of the pits. Aldrich stepped beside him, eyes softening. I'd forgotten what the sky looked like. Rowan swallowed. Me too. Behind them, the guards' shouts grew faint. Ahead of them lay the forest, dark, vast and full of danger. But it was theirs. Rowan glanced at Aldrich. Ready? Aldrich managed a tired smile. Ready enough? They stepped into the trees. Together. Chapter 7. The Wilds of the North. The forest swallowed them whole. Rowan and Aldrich pushed through the underbrush, branches scraping their arms, cold air burning their lungs. The moon hung low above the treetops, casting silver light across the forest floor. Every sound felt sharper out here, the rustle of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, the crack of a twig beneath their boots. Freedom was quieter than Rowan expected. Too quiet. Aldrich stumbled beside him, catching himself against a tree. Rowan moved quickly, steadying him before he fell. You're pushing too hard, Rowan said. Aldrich shook his head. We can't stop yet. Rowan glanced back through the trees. No torches, no shouts, no pursuit. 5 minutes, Rowan said. That's all. Aldrich hesitated, then nodded. Rowan guided him to a fallen log. Aldrich sat heavily, breathing hard. His injured shoulder was worse. Rowan could see it in the way he held himself, stiff and guarded. Rowan crouched beside him. Let me look. Aldrich gave him a tired glare. You're not a healer. You said that already, Rowan said. And I'm still here. Aldrich sighed, resigned. Rowan gently peeled back the bandage. The wound was swollen, the skin hot to the touch. Not infected yet, but close. Rowan tore another strip from his tunic and wrapped it tightly. We need clean water. And food. Aldrich nodded. There's a river north of here. If we follow the slope, we'll reach it by morning. Rowan helped him stand. Then we go north. They moved slowly now, Rowan keeping close to Aldrich's side. The forest grew denser, the trees taller, their branches knitting together overhead. The moonlight faded, replaced by darkness thick enough to feel. Rowan's stomach growled. Aldrich's did too. We need to find something to eat, Rowan said. Aldrich nodded. Berries. Roots. Anything. They searched as they walked, but the forest offered little. Rowan found a few shriveled berries, barely enough for a bird. Aldrich found a patch of edible roots, but they were tough and bitter. Still, they ate. It wasn't enough. Hours passed, the cold deepened. Rowan's breath fogged in front of him. Aldrich's steps grew slower, heavier. Rowan stopped. We need to rest. Aldrich shook his head. If we stop, we freeze. Rowan scanned the trees. There, a fallen pine lay against a boulder, forming a natural shelter. Rowan guided Aldrich inside, then crawled in after him. The space was cramped, but it blocked the wind. Aldrich leaned back against the boulder, eyes half closed. Thank you. Rowan sat beside him, shoulder to shoulder. For what? For not leaving me behind. Rowan snorted. You'd do the same. Aldrich's voice softened. I already have. Rowan didn't argue. They sat in silence, listening to the wind whistle through the branches. Rowan's eyelids grew heavy. Exhaustion pulled at him like a tide. He drifted into sleep. He woke to the sound of growling. Rowan's eyes snapped open. The forest was still dark, but he could make out shapes moving just beyond the shelter, low, sleek shapes with glowing eyes. Wolves. Aldrich stirred beside him. "Rowan?" Rowan grabbed his sword. "Stay behind me." Aldrich reached for his own blade, but his injured shoulder made him wince. Rowan stepped forward, blocking the entrance. The wolves circled, their breath steaming in the cold air. Rowan tightened his grip on the sword. His heart pounded, but his stance was steady. One wolf lunged. Rowan swung, not to kill, but to drive it back. The blade sliced through the air, and the wolf retreated with a snarl. Another wolf darted in from the side. Rowan pivoted, raising his sword. The wolf snapped at his leg, teeth grazing his boot. Rowan kicked it away. Aldrich struggled to his feet, sword in hand. "Rowan!" "I've got it," Rowan said. But the wolves were hungry, desperate, and there were too many. Aldrich stepped beside Rowan, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. "Together," Rowan nodded. "Together." They fought side by side, blades flashing in the moonlight. Rowan struck with strength. Aldrich struck with precision. The wolves snapped and lunged, but the two knights held their ground. Finally, the pack retreated into the trees, snarling as they disappeared into the darkness. Rowan lowered his sword, chest heaving. "You all right?" Aldrich leaned against the boulder, breathing hard. "I will be." Rowan sheathed his sword. "We need to move at first light." Aldrich nodded. The river, fresh water, food, safety. Rowan sat beside him again, exhaustion settling over him like a blanket. "We'll make it." Aldrich looked at him, really looked at him, and nodded. "Yes, we will." They rested until the first pale light of dawn touched the treetops. Then they rose, bruised and hungry, but alive, and they walked north. Together. Chapter 8. The Village of Refuge. By midday, Rowan's legs felt like they were made of stone. The forest had grown thicker, the trees crowding together as if trying to keep the world out. The ground sloped downward, and Rowan could hear the faint rush of water somewhere ahead, the river Aldrich had spoken of. Aldrich leaned heavily on him now. His face was pale, jaw clenched against the pain in his shoulder. Rowan kept an arm around him, steadying him with every step. "We're close," Rowan said. Aldrich nodded, though his eyes were unfocused. "Good, because I'm running out of clever things to say." Rowan huffed a tired laugh. "You had clever things to say?" Aldrich managed a faint smile. "One or two." They pushed through a final line of brush and stumbled onto a riverbank. The water was clear, cold, and fast-moving. Rowan dropped to his knees and drank deeply, the icy water shocking his senses awake. Aldrich knelt beside him, cupping water in his good hand. Rowan watched him carefully. Aldrich's movements were slower, more deliberate, as if every motion cost him something. "We need to clean your wound," Rowan said. Aldrich nodded. "Do it." Rowan helped him remove the bandage. The wound was swollen, but not as bad as it could have been. Rowan washed it gently with river water, then wrapped it again with the last clean strip of cloth he had. Aldrich exhaled. "Thank you." Rowan shrugged. "You'd do the same." Aldrich didn't answer, but he didn't need to. They followed the river north, moving slowly. Rowan kept scanning the trees, listening for anything that sounded like pursuit. But the forest remained quiet, too quiet. As the sun dipped lower, Rowan spotted smoke rising above the treetops, thin, pale, drifting lazily into the sky. Aldrich saw it too. A village. Rowan hesitated. Could be friendly, could be worse. Aldrich leaned against a tree, breathing hard. "We don't have a choice." Rowan looked at him, really looked at him. Aldrich's strength was fading. His shoulder was worsening. They needed shelter, food, rest. Rowan nodded. "All right, stay close." They followed the smoke until the trees thinned and a small village came into view. A cluster of wooden huts, a few grazing goats, a well in the center. Children played near a fence, their laughter drifting through the air. Rowan felt something tighten in his chest. Peace. He had almost forgotten what it looked like. A woman carrying a basket of herbs spotted them first. Her eyes widened at the sight of two battered, exhausted knights emerging from the forest. "By the heavens," she whispered. "What happened to you?" Rowan raised his hands slowly. "We're not here to cause trouble. We just need help." The woman studied them. Their torn clothes, their bruises, the dried blood on Aldrich's shoulder. Her expression softened. "Come," she said. "You look half dead." She led them to a small hut near the edge of the village. Inside, the air smelled of herbs and warm bread. Rowan helped Aldrich sit on a wooden bench while the woman gathered supplies. "My name is Mara," she said. "I'm the healer here." Rowan nodded. "I'm Rowan. This is Aldrich." Mara examined Aldrich's shoulder with practiced hands. "You're lucky. Another day and this would have turned bad." Aldrich managed a tired smile. "We've had a few lucky moments lately." Mara cleaned the wound with warm water and herbs. Aldrich winced but stayed silent. Rowan watched every movement, ready to step in if needed. "You two aren't from around here," Mara said. Rowan shook his head. "We escaped the Iron Host." Mara froze. "They're close?" "Not anymore," Rowan said. "We made sure of that." Mara nodded slowly. "Then you're safe here. For now." She finished bandaging Aldrich's shoulder, then handed Rowan a bowl of stew. Rowan ate like a starving man. Aldrich did too, though more slowly. When they finished, Mara stepped outside to fetch blankets. Rowan leaned back against the wall, letting out a long breath. "We made it?" Aldrich nodded, eyes half closed. "For now." Rowan studied him. "You're hiding something." Aldrich's eyes opened fully, sharp, alert, guarded. "What makes you say that?" he asked. Rowan shrugged. "You get quiet when you're thinking too much." Aldrich looked away. "There are things I need to tell you. But not tonight." Rowan didn't push. "All right." Aldrich met his eyes again. And there was something there Rowan hadn't seen before. Something heavy, something important. "Soon," Aldrich said quietly. "I promise." Rowan nodded. "I'll hold you to it." Mara returned with blankets. Rowan and Aldrich lay down on the floor, exhaustion pulling them under almost instantly. As Rowan drifted into sleep, he heard Aldrich whisper something he wasn't sure he was meant to hear. "Thank you, brother." Rowan didn't answer, but he smiled. Chapter 9. The Truth Revealed. Rowan woke to the smell of warm bread. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. The soft crackle of a hearth fire, the faint scent of herbs, the gentle morning light filtering through the shutters. It all felt impossibly peaceful after the darkness of the Iron Host's pits. Then he remembered the village, Mara, the blankets, Aldrich whispering brother as sleep claimed him. Rowan sat up slowly, stretching sore muscles. Aldrich was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bench with his injured arm resting in a sling Mara had fashioned from clean cloth. "You're up early," Rowan said. Aldrich didn't look at him. "Couldn't sleep." Rowan studied him. Aldrich's face was calm, but his eyes were troubled. Heavy, as if he'd been carrying something for far too long. Rowan stood and crossed the small room. "Your shoulder?" "Better," Aldrich said. "Thanks to you." "And Mara?" Rowan nodded. "Good." Silence settled between them. Not the comfortable kind they'd grown used to, but something tighter, something waiting. Aldrich took a slow breath. "Rowan, there's something I need to tell you." Rowan sat beside him. "I figured—" Aldrich gave a faint, humorless smile. "Of course you did." He reached for the small leather satchel he'd kept close since their escape. The one Rowan had assumed held nothing more than a few scraps of food or a spare cloth. Aldrich opened it carefully, almost reverently. Inside were 2 rings, identical, simple but beautifully crafted, polished silver bands engraved with a pattern Rowan didn't recognize. They caught the morning light and glowed softly. Rowan frowned. "What are those?" Aldrich held one ring in his palm. "My father gave them to me before he died." Rowan's breath caught. "Your father?" Aldrich nodded. "King Alistair." Rowan stared at him. The words didn't make sense at first. They felt too big, too heavy, too unreal. You're the heir to Highcrest, Aldrich said quietly. Yes. Rowan's mouth went dry. He stood abruptly, pacing the small room. You're the heir. The heir. And you didn't tell me? Aldrich didn't flinch. Would it have changed anything? Rowan stopped. Yes, it would have changed everything. Aldrich met his eyes. That's why I didn't tell you. Rowan opened his mouth, then closed it. Anger, confusion, disbelief, all of it tangled inside him. Aldrich continued, voice steady but soft. My father told me that I would meet someone, a friend who would become a brother, someone I could trust with my life, someone who would stand beside me when the kingdom needed us most. He held out the 2 rings. One for me, Aldrich said, and one for him. Rowan stared at the rings, his heart pounding. Aldrich's voice dropped to a whisper. Rowan, I believe that person is you. Rowan felt the world tilt. He sat down slowly, rubbing a hand over his face. Aldrich, I'm no prince. I'm not even a knight. I'm just... You're the man who saved my life, Aldrich said. Twice. Rowan shook his head. You saved mine. Aldrich smiled faintly. Then we're even. Rowan looked at the rings again. Why me? Aldrich didn't hesitate. Because when everything fell apart, you stayed. You fought beside me. You carried me through the forest. You treated me like a man, not a title. Rowan swallowed hard. I didn't know. I didn't want you to know, Aldrich said. Not until I was sure. Sure of what? Aldrich's voice softened. That you were the brother my father spoke of. Rowan felt something shift inside him. Something deep, something steady, something that felt like truth. He looked at Aldrich, really looked at him, the man who had stood between him and a guard's rod. The man who had fought wolves at his side. The man who had whispered brother when he thought Rowan was asleep. Rowan exhaled slowly. Aldrich, I don't know if I'm worthy of that. Aldrich placed one ring in Rowan's hand. You already are. Rowan closed his fingers around the ring. It felt warm, solid, real. Aldrich held out his hand. Whatever comes next, he said, we face it together. Rowan looked at the ring again, then slipped it onto his finger. Together, Rowan said. Aldrich smiled. Not the faint, guarded smile Rowan had seen before, but something genuine, something relieved, something like hope. Outside, the village stirred with morning life. Inside, 2 brothers, not by blood but by choice, prepared for the road ahead. Chapter 10. The road back to Highcrest. They left the village at dawn. Mara stood at the edge of the path, arms crossed, watching them with a mixture of worry and pride. She had given them food, water, and fresh bandages, more than she could spare, Rowan suspected. You 2 will find trouble, she said. Aldrich smiled faintly. We usually do. Mara shook her head. Then at least try not to die in it. Rowan bowed his head. Thank you. For everything. She waved them off. Go. Before I change my mind and make you stay until that shoulder heals. Aldrich adjusted the strap of his pack. We'll be careful. Mara snorted. No, you won't. But you'll survive. I can see it in your eyes. Rowan and Aldrich exchanged a glance. A quiet, shared understanding. Then turned toward the forest path leading south. Toward Highcrest. Toward home. The first day was quiet. Too quiet. The forest stretched endlessly before them, the trees tall and ancient, their branches whispering in the wind. Rowan walked slightly ahead, scanning the path. Aldrich followed close behind, his steps steady but slower than usual. How's the shoulder? Rowan asked. Aldrich rolled it gently. Better. Rowan raised an eyebrow. Aldrich sighed. Mostly better, Rowan smirked. That's what I thought. Aldrich shook his head, but there was warmth in his eyes. You're insufferable. And you're terrible at pretending you're fine, Aldrich chuckled. Fair. They walked in silence for a while, the forest alive with birdsong and rustling leaves. Rowan found himself glancing at Aldrich more than once, not out of worry but out of something deeper, responsibility, loyalty, brotherhood. The ring on his finger felt heavier today, not burdensome, meaningful. Aldrich noticed him looking. You're thinking too loudly, Rowan snorted. You're imagining things. Aldrich shook his head. No, you're wondering what it means. The rings, the prophecy, all of it. Rowan hesitated. Maybe... Aldrich slowed his pace. Rowan, I didn't choose you because of a prophecy. I chose you because you earned it. Rowan looked away. I'm no king. Neither was my father, Aldrich said softly. Until he had to be... Rowan didn't answer. Aldrich continued, voice steady. You don't need a title to be worthy. You just need a heart that doesn't break when the world does. Rowan swallowed hard. And you think I have that? Aldrich smiled. I know you do. Rowan didn't trust himself to speak, so he kept walking. They made camp near a fallen oak as the sun dipped below the horizon. Rowan gathered wood while Aldrich prepared what little food they had left, dried meat, a few roots Mara had given them, and a small loaf of bread. As the fire crackled to life, Rowan sat beside Aldrich. We'll need more food tomorrow. Aldrich nodded. There's a hunting trail east of here. We can try our luck. Rowan stretched his sore legs. And after that? Aldrich stared into the fire. We keep moving. Highcrest is still days away. Rowan nodded. And the Iron Host? They'll be hunting us, Aldrich said. But they're scattered. Weak. We have the advantage. Rowan smirked. For once, Aldrich chuckled. Don't get used to it. They ate in silence, the fire warming their faces. Rowan leaned back against the oak, feeling exhaustion settle into his bones. Aldrich glanced at him. You should sleep. You first, Rowan said. Aldrich shook his head. You're worse off than I am. Rowan raised an eyebrow. Your shoulder disagrees. Aldrich sighed. Fine, we both sleep. But only after we set a watch. Rowan nodded. I'll take first. Aldrich didn't argue. He lay down beside the fire, pulling his cloak around him. Rowan watched him for a moment. The steady rise and fall of his chest, the faint lines of pain around his eyes, the ring glinting on his finger. A brother. Chosen, not born. Rowan turned his gaze to the forest, listening to the night sounds, the crackle of the fire, the whisper of wind, the distant howl of something hunting far from here. He tightened his grip on his sword. They were close now, close to home, close to the truth, close to the moment when Aldrich would stand before the kingdom and claim his birthright. And Rowan would stand beside him. Not as a knight, not as a subject, but as a king and a brother. Chapter 11. Return to the Kingdom. The mountains appeared on the horizon at dusk. Rowan saw them first, jagged silhouettes rising against the fading sky, their peaks crowned with snow. The sight hit him like a blow. He slowed, breath catching in his chest. Aldrich stepped beside him, following his gaze. Home. Rowan nodded. Home. But something felt wrong. The air was too still, the valley too quiet. No distant horns, no patrols, no smoke from the watchtowers. Aldrich noticed it too. His jaw tightened. We should move carefully. They descended the ridge and followed a narrow path through the foothills. The closer they came to Highcrest, the heavier the silence grew. Rowan's hand drifted to the hilt of his sword more than once. By the time they reached the outer farmlands, night had fallen. The fields were empty, the cottages dark, not abandoned, but shuttered, silent, as if the people inside were afraid to breathe. Rowan frowned. Where is everyone? Aldrich scanned the shadows. Something's happened. They moved through the village, boots crunching softly on the dirt road. A single lantern flickered behind a window. Rowan approached and knocked gently. The lantern went out. Aldrich stepped forward. We're not enemies, he said quietly. We're knights of Highcrest. Silence. Then a voice whispered from behind the door. There are no knights left. Rowan and Aldrich exchanged a look. Aldrich spoke again. Open the door, please. After a long moment, the door cracked open. A man peered out, middle-aged, weary, fear etched into every line of his face. His eyes widened when he saw Aldrich's armor, Rowan's sword, the rings on their hands. You're alive, the man whispered. Aldrich stepped closer. What happened here? The man swallowed hard. The council declared the throne empty. Said the royal line was broken. said Highcrest needed new leadership. Rowan's stomach twisted. A coup. The man nodded. They took control of the city, closed the gates. Anyone who resisted was dealt with. Aldrich's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. Who leads them? Lord Varron, the man whispered. He claims the right to rule. Says the kingdom needs strength, not tradition. Rowan felt anger rise in his chest. He's a traitor. The man nodded. Many think so, but no one can stand against him, not without the true heir. Aldrich's eyes hardened. The true heir stands before you. The man stared at him, really stared, and Rowan saw the moment recognition dawned. Prince Aldrich, the man breathed. By the heavens, we thought you were dead. Aldrich shook his head. Not yet. The man opened the door fully. You must go to the capital. The people will rise for you. Aldrich nodded. We will. Rowan stepped forward. Is there a safe path? The man pointed toward the hills. Take the old hunter's trail. It leads to the north gate. It's less guarded. Aldrich placed a hand on the man's shoulder. Thank you. The man bowed his head. Bring our kingdom back. Aldrich and Rowan left the village behind, moving quickly through the darkened fields. The moon rose high, casting pale light across the land. Rowan walked beside Aldrich, his voice low. You ready for this? Aldrich didn't answer immediately. He looked toward the distant glow of Highcrest, faint, flickering, like a dying ember. No, Aldrich said finally. But I'll do it anyway. Rowan nodded. Then I'm with you. Aldrich glanced at him, a small smile forming. I know. They reached the base of the hills and began the climb. The path was narrow, winding between boulders and thorn bushes. Rowan kept his sword drawn. Aldrich moved with quiet determination, every step bringing them closer to the city walls. When they reached the ridge, Rowan froze. Highcrest lay below them, the great stone city, the shining heart of the kingdom of righteousness. But it was different. Torches lined the walls. Patrols marched in tight formation. The banners of the royal family were gone, replaced by the sigil of Lord Varron, a black wolf on a crimson field. Aldrich's breath caught. He's taken everything. Rowan stepped beside him. Not everything. Aldrich looked at him. You're still alive, Rowan said. And you're not alone. Aldrich's eyes softened. No, I'm not. Rowan sheathed his sword. What's the plan? Aldrich straightened, shoulders squared despite the pain. We go to the gates. We show them who I am. And we take back our kingdom. Rowan nodded. Together. Aldrich looked at the city, his city, and the fire in his eyes burned brighter than the torches on the walls. Together, he said. And the two brothers began their descent toward destiny. Chapter 12. Brothers of the Throne. The north gate of Highcrest loomed before them. Tall stone walls rose into the night sky, lit by torches that flickered in the cold wind. Rowan and Aldrich stood in the shadows of the outer ridge, watching the patrols march along the battlements. The city felt tense, guarded, suspicious, as if holding its breath. Aldrich exhaled slowly. This is it, Rowan nodded. You ready? Aldrich gave a faint smile. No, but I'm going anyway, Rowan smirked. Good. I'd hate to do this alone. Aldrich chuckled under his breath. You won't. They stepped out of the shadows and walked toward the gate. The guards spotted them immediately. Halt, one shouted. State your business. Rowan and Aldrich kept walking. The guards lowered their spears. I said halt. Aldrich stopped just outside the torchlight. Rowan stood beside him, hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Aldrich raised his voice, steady and clear. I am Aldrich, son of King Alistair, heir to the throne of Highcrest. The guards froze. One laughed nervously. The prince is dead. At the armour, the bearing, the unmistakable resemblance to the late king. And the ring on his hand. Silence fell. Then one guard dropped to his knees. "My prince." The others followed, kneeling in the dirt. Rowan felt something shift in the air, a ripple of recognition, of hope, of fear. Aldrich's voice was calm. "Open the gate." The guards scrambled to obey. The heavy doors groaned as they swung inward, revealing the city beyond, dark streets, shuttered windows, and the distant glow of torches near the palace. Rowan stepped beside Aldrich. "Once we're inside, Varon will know." Aldrich nodded. "Let him." They entered the city. Highcrest was not the place they remembered. The streets were empty. The banners of the royal family were gone, replaced by Varon's crimson wolf. Soldiers patrolled the main roads, their armor mismatched and their discipline sloppy. Mercenaries, not true knights. Rowan's jaw tightened. He's turned the city into a fortress. Aldrich's eyes hardened. "Then we break it open." They moved quickly through the alleys, avoiding patrols. Rowan led the way, sword drawn, senses sharp. Aldrich followed close behind, his steps steady despite the pain in his shoulder. When they reached the palace gates, Rowan stopped. 24 guards stood between them and the throne room. Aldrich stepped forward. "Rowan." Rowan looked at him. Aldrich held out his hand, the hand with the ring. "Whatever happens, you're my brother." Rowan swallowed hard. "And you're mine," Aldrich nodded. "Then let's finish this." They walked toward the guards. The first guard shouted, "Halt! State your—" Aldrich raised his hand, the ring catching the torchlight. The guard stared. One whispered, "By the heavens, it's him." Another dropped his spear. "Prince Aldrich." Rowan stepped forward. "Stand aside." The guards hesitated, then parted, kneeling as Aldrich passed. Rowan and Aldrich entered the palace. Lord Varon waited in the throne room. He stood at the foot of the dais, armored in black steel, a crimson wolf emblazoned on his chest. His eyes narrowed as Aldrich approached. "So," Varon said, voice dripping with disdain, "the lost prince returns." Aldrich stopped a few paces away. "You betrayed the kingdom." "I saved it," Varon snapped. "Highcrest needed strength, not a boy who ran from battle." Rowan stepped forward, fury burning in his chest. He didn't run. He was captured. "Fighting for this kingdom," Varon sneered. "And now he returns with a stray soldier at his side, claiming the throne?" Rowan's hand tightened on his sword. Aldrich placed a hand on Rowan's arm, calm, steady, commanding. "I don't claim the throne," Aldrich said. "I inherit it." Varon laughed. "You think the people will follow you?" Aldrich raised his hand, showing the ring. "They already are." The doors behind them opened. Guards, servants, citizens, dozens of them. Word had spread through the city like wildfire. They filled the hall, whispering, pointing, kneeling. Varon's face twisted with rage. "You think this changes anything?" Aldrich stepped forward. "Yes, everything." Varon drew his sword. Rowan stepped in front of Aldrich instantly. "You want him?" "You go through me." Aldrich stepped beside Rowan. "No, through us." Varon hesitated, just long enough. The palace guards moved. Not toward Aldrich, toward Varon. He spun, eyes wide. "What are you doing?" One guard spoke, voice firm. "Serving the true king." Varon roared and swung his blade, but he was outnumbered. The guards disarmed him, forcing him to his knees. Aldrich stepped forward. "Your rule is over." Varon spat at his feet. "You're weak." Aldrich shook his head. "No, I'm not alone." He turned to Rowan. Rowan felt his breath catch. Aldrich climbed the steps to the throne, then stopped halfway and extended his hand. "Rowan," he said, voice steady, strong, royal. "Come stand with me." Rowan hesitated. "Aldrich." "You are my brother," Aldrich said, "chosen by my father, proven by fire. You will not stand behind me. You will stand beside me." Rowan climbed the steps. Aldrich placed the second ring, Rowan's ring, against his chest. "Highcrest has 2 kings now," Aldrich said. "One by blood, one by bond." The hall erupted in cheers. Aldrich turned to Rowan, eyes shining. "My brother." Rowan placed a hand on Aldrich's shoulder. "My king." Aldrich shook his head. "Our kingdom." Rowan smiled. "Our throne." Together they faced the people of Highcrest, 2 brothers, 2 kings, united not by birth, but by loyalty, sacrifice, and and the unbreakable bond forged in darkness. And the kingdom of righteousness rose to its feet.